Great. Okay, so are we on? Okay, I think we've got sound people, so we're going to go ahead into this. And I just want to thank Eli and thank the cast for another great night. You know, every production of a Shakespeare play is different. It takes a fresh look at a classic. And this production is really different. Eli even gave it a new title, A Midsummer Night's Zoom. And I've been immersed in this project for the last month. And the question I keep asking myself is this: what does A Midsummer Night's Zoom bring out in Shakespeare's text? What new dialogue between past and present is initiated in our production? So here's what I've come up with. Shakespeare's play is about multiple worlds. I sometimes compare A Midsummer Night's Dream to a big layer cake, but you can choose any analogy: a building with several stories, including a basement and a penthouse, or how about the layers of an onion with similar plots running parallel to each other? In fact, Shakespeare thought of the cosmos as a kind of giant onion, with the earth at the center, and then moon and planets and sun and stars rotating around it. When all of these layers were in perfect harmony, it made something they called the music of the spheres. Somebody in the chat mentioned sephirot, or Kabbalistic emanations, another kind of layering of worlds. At the beginning of our play, the spheres are out of joint because the fairy king and the fairy queen are fighting. And by the end, things have gotten tuned up again, we hope. So what are the different worlds of this play? Well, we have the worlds of social class, the working people, the aristocrats, and the rulers. We also have the worlds of opposing generations, right? The clueless, judgmental parents and the tech-savvy, sexually curious young people. And then, of course, we have the big onion, right? The cosmic and microcosmic worlds: city, forest, moon, fairies. And so what I kind of discovered in the process of being part of these rehearsals is that when you stage A Midsummer Night's Dream in Zoom, you can really dramatize these worlds and this world making. Here are a few examples. In the trial scene at the very beginning of part 1, Duke Theseus and the Amazon Queen Hippolyta are at the top of the screen. They're the rulers and also the judges in what is a trial, right? A legal dispute between a father, his daughter, and her suitors. The young people are at the bottom of the screen, right? This indicates their powerlessness in Zoomland. And the Zoom grid becomes a court of law. So what happens when we get to the forest? Well, there we kind of have the two layers of the fairies and the mortals running in parallel, but not exactly touching. Oberon and Puck are usually on top, looking down at the young lovers below, and occasionally dripping weird plant plasma into the porches of their ears. The fairies see, the young lovers are seen. Sometimes Puck wanders among them, but always invisible. Oberon remains above in the treetops. In a face-to-face production, we'd probably put Oberon and Puck up in the balcony. Well, the Zoom grid creates a kind of virtual balcony, if you know how to stage the play for it. And did you notice that Bottom is the only mortal, the only human character in the play who gets to see, feel, touch, smell, and be fed by the fairies? He probably also has sex with Titania because he has really big ears. Only Bottom has a total sensory immersion in the forest's hidden life. And in our production, he's the only mortal character in the woods who gets to use one of those nifty snap camera filters. Bottom becomes part of the magic. Bottom, and only Bottom, can exist on the same plane as titania. The onion has opened up. The layer cake has been cut. The music of the spheres is rocking. So let's hear more about the challenges of Zoom theater and the art of building worlds in Zoom from our amazing director and actors, and also from you. You can pose your questions in the live chat box. Okay, so welcome actors and welcome to our wonderful group here. We've got 130 people in our live chat talkback session. And someone named Mark Span must be related to Sean Span. Hi, Mark. He says, wonderful acting by all. It felt very natural and comfortable to watch and impressive from a technical standpoint. And here's Mark's question. How difficult was it to rehearse the cuts from one character to another? I wonder whether Sean should answer that.
I assume he means rehearse transitions, right? Can you repeat the question one more time so I can make sure I get I hear my father correctly?
The cuts, the cues, the movement from one character to another. It is harder in Zoom. We talked a lot about this during rehearsal. How is it technically different switching from one speaker to another in this medium versus in face-to-face theater?
I mean, I think there's a little bit of there has to be a lot of trust in Merle and Julia and Eli watching the feed of the live rehearsal to let us know when we're either picking up our cues well or completely leaving Mack truck sized pauses for silence to drive through. So there's a little bit of trust that has to happen, and I think, at least I can only speak for myself, in rehearsal we just had to go when we thought we should go and then cross fingers that someone will tell us if it's bad. I think that's sort of an existential crisis inducing element of this work is we sometimes have no idea if it's reading while we're doing it. We just have to trust the people involved in watching it. But that's just my experience, the fear of what does it look like? We kind of have to put that aside and just live in trust, which is kind of the way it always is, I guess.
Theater and trust.
Does anybody else?
So closely related. I wonder if someone else wants to comment on that as well.
Good question, Mark Span.
Caden, I mean, there's so much cross-cutting and quick cues in some of those speeches with the lovers, or the lovers' discourse, where they're really kind of riffing with each other when they're alone on the stage for the first time. How hard is that to do on Zoom?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. I mean, we all definitely miss being in person with each other and getting that energy from an in-room experience. But also just feeling, Meg talked about this last night, I believe. We have so much sense memory from doing this together the first time around. It's in our bodies and in our hearts. And you can kind of lock into that shared energy and just kind of, use the audio cues to kind of remind your body and just go from there. So at times it felt as if I was in the room with people. And then at times it felt like I was, staring at a dot in the wall alone in my house,
Exactly. Yeah. Well, here's another question about memory. This is from the wonderful Don Hill, who's back again tonight. And he says, excellent job, everyone. What was it like? Maybe this is a good question for Thomas. I think this came up a couple of times in rehearsal. What was it like incorporating the word Zoom into the text? Was it difficult to unlearn the text? Thomas, you had Athenians and then Zoom and,
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us reference it at some point, or most of us do, just always changing that Athens to Zoom or Zoomland. Yeah, it was difficult because I think, especially with Shakespeare, a lot of the language, I almost sometimes it seems kind of counterintuitive, but Shakespeare language is almost easier to remember, especially after long periods of time, because especially with this show, because of the meter and the rhyme, and it's very easy to feel when you're wrong because it won't work. um, so so in that way, it was almost kind of like having to totally unlearn something and put this other context in, or this other change in. But at the same time too, it's a good reminder, because when you have something so ingrained, sometimes it's easy to go on autopilot, and that's not what we're wanting to do as actors. We're wanting to be in the moment and present with our scene partners, even if we're having to pretend to look at them, trying to do as best as we can to be alive in the moment. And I think that, for example, while difficult, was a good reminder to really plug into what is this story, as opposed to just going on autopilot from the previous version.
Absolutely. Here's a comment from the wonderful Charles McNulty of the LA Times. Charles says, the confusion of seasons was especially resonant for me. The weather is out of joint, reflecting discord on the earthly plane, an unexpected and timely resource, science, politics, and humanity. I wonder whether, Eli, you want to talk a little bit about the choice of the backgrounds, the time you spent curating those, especially the outdoor environments, which change from scene to scene, even though they're all part of the same forest. How you think about this play in terms of the dissonances and in the Sephirot and our desire to retune them somehow through the work of theater to align the spheres again, if we can.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here, Charles. And so thank you for checking the show out again. And you're right, it really has mutated here onto Zoom. And one of the big differences is pretty apparent anyway, which is that we can use these backgrounds and they're instantly applicable to any scene that you want. So um, when we're in our little theater, we have no way to fly in scenery. You're basically with the scenery from start to finish. You might be able to light it up, or maybe pull a curtain, as you can see behind Julia's head. But here in Zoom, we really did have a chance to turn the world a little bit topsy-turvy. And Titania really talks about the world being out of joint. And I thought, well, maybe we should just have one forest look, but really coming off of that monologue about how the world is out of joint and everything's a little upside down and unsettled, just as we are right now in our lives, I thought it best to keep the world of the play shifting and changing literally right behind the actors. And I tried to pick backgrounds that were evocative and deep, and a little bit mystical as well, and beautiful. So I really love the forest photos. Just took a little while to find them and to sort through them and to figure out which worked best for what scenes. And a lot of that, as with all theater, is trial and error, just trying certain ones and throwing them out if they didn't work. So it was a process.
Beautiful, thank you. Here's a great question from, let's see, I just think it's changing here. It was a question about energy and the energy of the acting. Oh, this is from Dan Cordova. And I thought maybe Greg and Meg could talk about this because, Bottom and Titania have the most mystical relationship in the play. It's the most comic, but it's also the most sublime. And to communicate those elements really takes a lot of trust and communication between the actors. And so the question here is, how different was it to use the energy of your scene partners on Zoom versus when you performed it live a few years ago? How do you get that energy? How do you make it work for us? Meg or Greg? Unmute thyselves.
Go for it, Greg, and I'll go off you.
Greg, everybody's getting shy now.
All right.
You're not allowed, you're actors, you're not allowed to be shy.
Untrue.
So how do we use the energy? I think it was said a little earlier. One of the things going on is there's some memory, I think, in the body from having done it before. So I think there's some ghost from the previous production living in there. I hope. And then how do we do it? I think for myself, and I will speak for everybody because I think this is probably true for everybody, but voice up, please. I think we're always trying to listen and be present for whatever is happening, whether it's in person or on Zoom or when we're facing the wall. That effort is running in the background all of the time. I hope, even if there's something technical going on and I'm fiddling with it, I'm trying to be present for what is happening in my scene partner right then, even though we have this very, these technical, these issues. This is not new. This is the work of every film and television actor and every YouTube star and everybody who's ever put themselves in front of a screen and tried to be truthful with that obstacle. When a person, when you have scene partners in film and television, and that's different because you get to do that. But there are a lot of folks who for a long time been trying to do what we're doing. And so we can draw on a lot of their experiences if we've done it, our own experiences if we've done it, talking to people, learning it, whatever it is. But it's always, for me, how can I be right there listening and being present for whatever is happening, even if that's a Zoom thing that's gone wrong.
Meg?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Greg said 2 nights ago of there's nothing like live theater and being right here with another person. But for me, I was really working off of that memory recall and what's stored in my body of my experiences with Sean, Greg, and the whole cast on working on this show, but also over the past 3 seasons and also who we are as individuals in our life. So really working off that emotionally stored body memory and thinking, like, even though there's always a part of like it feels like something's missing because they're not there, but feeling like, oh, what would Greg do, or where, like the kind of energy we've cultivated between each one of us, and really trying to be as responsive as possible.
Beautiful. That's great. This is a question from someone named the Many Mancer. And I thought maybe Kieran might want to talk about this in terms of the rude mechanicals and also the fairy parts. The Many Mancer says, wonderful performance. What's a quality that the medium of Zoom added to the overall performance that you were surprised to find? Is there a discovery? Is there something that opened up, or is this all constraint?
Well, it's interesting actually, because I think of it as constraint, but I don't think of constraint as necessarily an intrinsically bad thing. For my character specifically, like when we were in the Swan, I had this, mechanic costume. I had one arm. I had a lot more permission to like be outwardly presenting my character as dumb, right, and having fun with that. And he's he's a little slow, and that's the humor of it. Not that being dumb is funny, but whereas on Zoom those things wouldn't have really worked, and so I had to transition. I wanted to keep the essence of the character and like his essence without necessarily having as much room to play. And so I had to refactor of like, what can I do? So like Eli and I think it was actually Greg's idea for like at the end of one of the scenes, or 2 of them, Snug, he forgot to log off, which there was just a lot of like fun little things like that opened up from this. And I think it also forced us all to kind of slow down, which really makes you question exactly what you're doing at every moment. So I think it was very constraining, but in some ways freeing in that constraint.
Yeah. And how about you, Hope? What was your experience working with Zoom? And did you have discoveries? Did you have a sense of building a new tool set or coming into a new form of relationship to this thing that's so much part of our life now, this Zoom thing?
I found out that Wi-Fi is horrible, and no matter what you do, you'll always freeze. I definitely have struggled with a lot of that, the technical issues, so much of it that seemed out of our hands, where I'm in grad school learning to act, not so much deal with all of this, but it's definitely taught me to breathe, because that's all I really could do amidst the really stressful moments. And I worked with Eli specifically on just slowing down, similar to kind of what like Karen had said about just like you were able to see how quickly. I mean, I know I speak really quickly usually when I'm acting, and this really highlighted that for me. So specifically that, I definitely it was a good tool to really notice that and work on that. And yeah, just remember that it's not all in our control. So to just breathe through it.
So this is a question that I think maybe Crystal and Caden might want to take up. It has to do with the decision to have Lysander become Lysandra. How does that affect the dynamic between the two of you, the relationship to Aegeus, the fierceness of your commitments? Maybe Crystal could address that, and then Caden.
Yeah, I think, well, the fierceness to commitment, that's always a great task for me. But I think it was really interesting because when we first did it, we set it in the 50s, as you can see from Greg Unger's background. That's our Talkback photos from way back when. And so transitioning from the 50s to now, I think was quite an adjustment. It wasn't quite an adjustment because a relationship is still a relationship, but I think in the 50s, there was a lot of other layers. For example, interracial marriages weren't legal at that time. LGBTQIA rights were just as difficult back then to gain. And so, yeah, I mean, there's always something to dive into. And I think this production maybe felt closer to home because it was more modern. I didn't have to wear a dress that I've never worn in my daily life, but still presented the same tangible human themes that we're always struggling with.
Great. And Caden, thoughts about the significance of this shift in the casting?
Yeah, I mean, I think Crystal said it beautifully. I think that it means something, absolutely. And I also think that every single person in this production in their part means something. You know, we have a lot of people of color in our production. We have women in our production, all of these bodies that otherwise were not originally allowed in these spaces. So I think we have a lot of characters that are transgressing what was traditional. And then of course, Lysander is a character that's not accepted by Aegeus. So, you know, obviously changing it to a female character means something significant and reflects a lot of what we see in our world with homophobia and transphobia and all that.
And Eli, do you want to comment on that? Because you made that decision in 2018 and you've kept it with this production. And do you have thoughts as well about the significance of that choice? Or does it reverberate through the play?
Well, I do think it reverberates through this production because it's what we decided to do with it. And I mean, the message is that love is love, and it doesn't matter who the two people are. we have to honor those kinds of love relationships, even if it's not what people expect when, and perhaps especially when they come to see a Shakespearean play in which we have a very heteronormative setup. I mean, that's basically what you see in Shakespeare. So we just decided to mix that up, and I'm really glad we did. I know it was very confronting for some of our audience members, but I like to think that maybe we moved people in the direction of more acceptance toward more people, and that is something that theater is uniquely suited to do. So that, in addition to having a really super diverse cast, it's maybe not as well represented right now on this screen, but it's a very diverse cast, and we're really excited about that, as well as keeping our gender mix as even as we possibly can, show by show. So these are important things to us at New Swan, and they have been, and will continue to be moving forward.
Well, we have a couple of videos on that topic as well on our website. We interviewed the actors, the young lovers, about issues in diversity in casting. And I've included a link to that in your confirmation email. So I encourage you to check out some of the materials we're trying to build around our productions that are educational and analytic and documenting the process. And of course, the play continues tomorrow night with part 2. It will be at 6 p.m. And we can't wait to share the second half of the play with you. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mom and Dad.